Welcome to this special commemoration honoring the incredible contributions of women in the military. Today we gather not only to reflect on the bravery, resilience, and dedication of the women who have served our nation, but also to recognize the important milestones in legislation that have shaped their roles in the armed forces. From breaking barriers on the front lines to inspiring future generations, these women have helped pave the way for greater equality and opportunity. As we pay tribute to their sacrifices and achievements, we also look forward to a future where their services continues to shape a stronger, more inclusive military for all.
Good morning. My name is Jeannie King, and I'm going to share some information regarding the logic behind excluding women from the military service. The exclusion of women from military service has been varied across cultures and time periods, often based on a combination of social, cultural, and perceived physical limitations of women. I'm going to share some of the key reasons that have been historically cited. Physical standards and perceived limitations. Many military institutions have traditionally believed that women may not meet the physical demands required for combat roles. The perspective often stems from outdated stereotypes about women and physical capabilities. Social and cultural norms. In the past, societal norms often confined women to domestic roles, fostering the belief that military service was unsuitable and inappropriate for them. This has been shaped by cultural norms and emphasize male dominance in combat roles. The concerns about unit cohesion. Some argue that incorporating women into combat units might affect unit cohesion and morale, often pointing to concerns about relationships between male and female soldiers. Fear of sexual harassment and assault. The military's history of sexual harassment and assault raises concerns about women's safety and well-being in male-dominated environments. Legal and policy frameworks. In many countries, including ours, laws and military policies have historically excluded women from certain roles, reinforcing a notion that combat is a male domain. Physical and emotional factors. Some argue that women may be less psychologically suited for combat roles, although this is increasingly challenged by research showing that women can perform equally and well under stress. The current trends. While many of these arguments have been challenged and increasingly debunked, still influence military policies in some regions. As societal attitudes shift and more women demonstrate their capabilities in combat roles, the rationale behind exclusion continues to evolve. In summation, while the historical logic behind excluding women from military service has its roots in physical, cultural, and psychological arguments, modern perspectives increasingly advocate for equality and inclusion, supported by ongoing research and changes in policy. Thank you.
Good morning. I will discuss a historical female figure in U.S. military history pre-VFW. Miss Kathy Williams, aka William Kathy. Kathy Williams was born in Independence in September of 1844. Her father was a free man. Her mother was a slave, which made her legal status that of a slave as well. In 1861, in the early stages of the Civil War, Union forces occupied Jefferson City, where Kathy worked as a house slave in her adolescence. Union Army took the enslaved people as contraband and forced them to work in military support roles. Until 1865, Kathy served in the Union Army by traveling south into Confederate territory as a cook and washwoman. In November of 1866, Kathy enlisted in the United States Regular Army under the false name William Kathy for a 3-year engagement as a man. She was assigned to the 38th U.S. Infantry Regiment, where she did guard duties, though it's unlikely she saw any combat. After her enlistment, Kathy contracted smallpox. Combined with the heat in New Mexico unit she was stationed, or possibly just the years of marching, she frequently fell ill and was routinely hospitalized. She was eventually found out to be a woman and was reported. She was discharged October 14th of 1868. Kathy stayed in the West in Colorado, where she worked as a seamstress. A reporter from St. Louis learned of her service and came to interview her. He published her story in the St. Louis Daily Times on January 2nd, 1876. In September of 1892, U.S. Pension Bureau doctor examined Kathy and denied her petition for disability pension, though she had documentation of her illnesses and had her toes amputated. Her exact date of death is unknown, but it's estimated she passed away shortly after in 1893. Her legacy is solidified as the only known female Buffalo soldier and first African-American woman to enlist and serve during the Indian Wars in the U.S. Army disguised as a man. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tricia. I'm here to talk about women on the home front during World War I and World War II. During World War I, the U.S. Food Administration, headed by Herbert Hoover, encouraged households with its slogan, "Food will win the war." Though formal rationing was not instituted during World War I, housewives were encouraged to self-sacrifice voluntarily by cutting waste and adopting meatless Mondays, wheatless Wednesdays, porkless Thursdays, and Sundays. Children were told to clean their plates whilst thinking of the starving orphans of Europe. Liberty bonds and thrift stamps helped to fund the war. Bonds were marketed and sold by celebrities such as Charlie Chaplin and Al Jolson, by scout troops, and by librarians. 4.5 million Liberty Loan reminder cards were placed in books at public libraries by more than 60,000 women volunteers throughout the country. By the war's end, the Liberty Bond drives raised more than $17 billion from over 20 million individuals. During World War II, prodded by Eleanor Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt created the following women's auxiliary forces: the WACs, Women's Auxiliary Army Corps; the WAVES, Women Accepted for Voluntary Emergency Service; the WASPs, Women's Air Force Service Pilots; and the SPARS, United States Coast Guard Women's Reserve. While traditional clerical work represented the bulk of the work, many worked in other specialized fields such as parachute riggers, chaplain's assistants, radio operators, electricians, and many more. For instance, a small group of women became pharmacists' maids, while others with practical nursing and medical experience were assigned to assist in sick bays. Many tested aircraft, ferried aircraft, and trained other pilots. During World War II, the colossal ranks of the armed services created a huge labor shortage, which inspired the Rosie the Riveter posters that beckoned housewives to enter the nation's factories. About 6.5 million women entered the workforce during the war years, many for the first time. Photographer Margaret Burke White told Life magazine on August 9, 1943, when photographing women at a steel plant in Illinois, that, quote, "In 1941, only 1% of aviation employees were women. Well, this year they will comprise an estimated 65% of the total. Of the 16 million women now employed in the U.S., over a quarter work in war industries. Although the concept of the weaker sex sweating near blast furnaces, directing giant ladles of molten iron, or pouring red-hot ingots is accepted in England and Russia, it has always been foreign to American tradition. Only the rising need for labor and the diminishing supply of manpower has forced this revolutionary adjustment. They are black, white, Polish, Croatian, Mexican, and Scottish. They have been accepted by management, by the union, and by the rough, iron-muscled men they work with day after day. In time of peace, they may return once more to home and family, but they have proved that in time of crisis, no job is too tough for American women."
Good morning. My part is on the women in the military for World War II and Korea. Mary Holleran was teaching junior high school when Pearl Harbor was attacked, and she instinctively followed her brothers to enlist. To her, there was no question that women should serve. She stood on her toes to meet the height requirement for enlistment. As she recalled it, she was challenged by a doubtful recruiter but passed muster after she told him, "You don't have to be 6 feet tall to have a brain that works." Colonel Halloran commanded the 1st Battalion of the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps to serve in Europe, the largest unit of women to serve overseas in World War II. Shortly afterward, the word auxiliary was dropped, making it the Women's Army Corps. And then we have June Marion Wandry Mann. Her obituary states that she is a life member of numerous veterans associations, which included the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Mrs. Mann was best known as the author of Bedpan Commando, an account of her service during World War II as the first lieutenant in the Army Nurse Corps from 1942 to 1946. She served in Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, and Germany. Toward the end of the combat, she served to ease the suffering of inmates at both Alak and Dachau concentration camps. And a quote of hers, "An 18-year-old boy is carried into the shock ward, and as he looks up at me, trustingly asking, 'How am I doing, nurse?' I just kiss his forehead and say, 'You are doing just fine, soldier.' He smiles sweetly and says, 'I was just checking.' Then he dies. We all cry in private, but not in front of the boys. Never in front of the boys." And then moving on to the Korean War. Women's presence in the armed forces became more culturally acceptable after Congress passed the Women's Armed Service Integration Act in 1948, just 2 years before the outbreak of hostilities in Korea. The act allowed women to serve as permanent members of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force for the first time in American history. Armed Force nurses played a crucial role in evacuating injured soldiers from battle zones in Korea, triaging their wounds and facilitating communications with loved ones back home. The reality was that during the Korean War, there were 120,000 women on active duty. A third of them were healthcare providers. Others stepped up when their country called on them, volunteering for service in the Women's Army Corps, women in the Air Force, Navy Women's Reserve, and women Marines. Shirley Gates McBride was one of the 120,000 female soldiers who contributed mightily in the UN war effort in Korea. She remembers taking care of wounded soldiers while serving at Pennsylvania's Valley Forge Army Hospital. She's quoted saying, "I remember one guy, he was a pianist, and they were trying to repair his hand so he could play the piano again. We saw a lot. I saw soldiers that came in with parts of their bodies missing." She recalled that at Valley Forge, the Army treated women the same as men. "We got the same pay. You were not a female soldier, you were a soldier. You were a corpsman, not a corps woman. It was yes ma'am and no ma'am, and yes sir and no sir." Dottie Harris also served valiantly in the war. Dottie was born in Verona, Pennsylvania in 1931. She enlisted in the Air Force when she was 19 years old and was stationed at James Connolly Air Force Base in Waco, Texas during the war. There, she served as an Airman First Class Sergeant. Dottie remembers that most of the men on the base accepted her and were respectful, but some thought she shouldn't be there. But regardless of those tensions, Dottie recalls a playful atmosphere at times between the men and women. Even snowball fights between men and women broke out on occasion.
Good morning. Today I will be telling you about Major General Marcelette J. Harris. Major General Harris was a trailblazer throughout her career, and it included many firsts. Harris was the first female aircraft maintenance officer, one of the first 2 women air officers commanding in the United States Air Force Academy, and Air Force female deputy commander of maintenance. She served as a White House social aide during the Carter administration. Harris retired from the military in 1997 with the rank of Major General after 32 years of service. She was the highest-ranking African-American woman in the Department of Defense, as well as the highest-ranking female officer in the Air Force during her service. Harris received a Bronze Star Presidential Unit Citation and Vietnam Service Medal. In 1999, she was also awarded an honorary doctorate degree from her alma mater. Major General Harris passed away on February 7th, 2019, with full military honors.
Good morning. Today I'll be talking about contemporary servicewomen from the Gulf War from 1990 to the present. Since the Gulf War, women's roles in the military have changed dramatically, with many of them now serving with distinction in both combat and leadership capacities. The following lists 3 prominent modern-day servicewomen who have made significant contributions to the U.S. military. General Anne E. Dunwoody served in the U.S. Army from 1975 to 2012. She attained the rank of 4-star general in 2008, making history as the first female in the U.S. military. Her professional background includes a broad range of supply chain management and logistics positions, all of which are essential to military operations and readiness. Dunwoody held leadership positions at all levels, including one where she oversaw a multi-billion-dollar logistics operation as the U.S. Army. Dunwoody's accomplishments paved the way for other women to ascend to senior leadership roles in the U.S. military. Her historic promotion marked a pivotal moment for women in the armed forces, demonstrating that they could attain the highest levels of command. Captain Tammy Duckworth served in the U.S. Army National Guard. She served from 1990 to 2014. Tammy Duckworth is one of the most well-known Iraq War veterans. She was a helicopter pilot for the U.S. Army. She was operating a Black Hawk chopper in 2004 when a rocket-propelled grenade struck to it. Duckworth survived the attack and rose to fame as a testament to tenacity and devotion. Duckworth's service and subsequent political career highlight the challenges faced by veterans, particularly those with disabilities. Her advocacy efforts have brought national attention to veteran health care and disability rights, making her an influential figure in both military and civilian spheres. Lastly, Air Force General Lori J. Robinson served in the U.S. Air Force from 1982 to 2018. When General Lori J. Robinson was named commander of the U.S. Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command in 2016, she made history as the first female to hold a significant position in a U.S. military unified combatant command. She served several senior roles in the Air Force during her 36-year tenure, including command posts in international operations and air battle management. These 3 servicewomen, Anne E. Dunwoody, Tammy Duckworth, and Lori J. Robinson, represent the profound contributions of women in the U.S. military from the Gulf War era to the present day. Their achievements reflect the increasing opportunities for women to serve in combat and leadership roles, as well as their enduring impact on military operations and policy.
Hello, my name is Tiffany, and I'll be talking about key healthcare legislation for women veterans. VFW fought for equal access to all VA facilities for women veterans, including community-based clinics and centers focused on women's health. Due to various VA Mission Act provisions, more VA facilities now have dedicated women's health providers and services, making access easier for women veterans across the U.S. To learn more about the VA Mission Act of 2018, go to congress.gov and search for House Bill 5674 and Senate Bill 2906. And to learn more about VFW's involvement with the VA Mission Acts, you can visit our media and events page on our website to read the article on May 3rd, 2018, titled VFW Rally Support for VA Mission Act of 2018. Because of key legislation like the Veterans Healthcare Eligibility Reform Act of 1996, which provides women veterans with detailed information on available VA health services before they separate from the military, and the Deborah Sampson Act in 2020, which expanded services and removed barriers to care for women veterans in the VA system, women veterans have access to maternity care, gynecology, mental health programs, and gender-specific disability claims. To read our statement about the Deborah Sampson Act here at the VFW, posted on March 18, 2021, titled Beyond Deborah Sampson, Improving Healthcare for America's Women Veterans in the 117th Congress. You can visit the congressional testimony page on our website. Through sustained advocacy, women veterans now enjoy greater access to healthcare, benefits, and protections, reinforcing the nation's commitment to serving all its veterans equally. But, of course, VFW's work is not done. VFW continues to advocate for further legislation to support and honor the service of women veterans. Thank you.
Women in the military have made significant strides since the time of Kathy Williams, but challenges still remain. Women are excluded from combat roles in the military predominantly due to societal expectations. A large segment of the American population historically shared the views that women should be protected from harm and that women should not kill. In 1988, the risk rule excluded women from non-combat units or missions if the risk of exposure to direct combat, hostile fire, or capture were equal to or greater than the risk in the units they supported. In 1994, saw Defense Secretary Les Aspin rescind the risk rule, saying service members are eligible to be assigned to all positions for which they are qualified, except that women shall be excluded from assignment to units below the brigade level, whose primary mission it is to engage in direct combat on the ground. On January 9th, 2013, former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Martin Dempsey announced the decision to lift the ban on women serving in combat units. Panetta stated that it is a unanimous view of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to move forward with the full intent to integrate women into occupational fields to the maximum extent possible. This effort, he said, should be driven by the following principles: ensuring the success of our nation's warfighting forces by preserving unit readiness, cohesion, and morale. Ensuring all servicemen and women are given the opportunity to succeed and are set up for success with variable career paths. Retaining the trust and confidence of the American people to defend the nation by promoting policies that maintain the best quality and the most qualified people. Validating occupational performance standards, both physical and mental, for all military occupational specialties, MOSs, specifically those that remain closed to women. Paving the way. Since 2013, we have seen a slew of historical firsts, from the first female graduates of the Army Ranger School in 2015 to the first female Marine to lead the infantry platoon in 2018. By 2019, more than 600 female sailors and Marines were serving in combat arms units previously restricted to men. While more than 650 women held Army combat roles and over 1,000 had accessed Army combat specialties. In 2021, we witnessed the appointments of the Pentagon's second and third female combatant commanders, and of its first confirmed female Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks. In 2022, Admiral Linda Fagan was sworn in as a Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard, becoming the first woman to lead any branch of the armed forces. However, gender integration efforts are still in their early stages. and have had varying levels of success across the services. Although the fraction of active duty service women has increased across all services, they still make up only 17% of the armed forces. We need to improve the support of women. Improving support of women in the military involves several key areas: health and wellness, equipment and uniforms, representation and leadership, policy and culture, combat roles and opportunities. By focusing on these areas, we can create a more supportive and equitable environment for women serving in our armed forces and beyond. In the next decade, to achieve a more equitable U.S. military, we may find some answers in the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Service, DCAWTS. Established in 1951, the committee is appointed by the Secretary of Defense to provide recommendations on recruitment, retention, employment, integration, well-being, and treatment of women in the armed forces. As of 2022, approximately 97% of the committee's recommendations have either been fully or partially adopted by the department. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.